to our Groundskeeper Chat series. I am your host, Meg Kruger, and today we have a special edition episode. We are interviewing one of our 2025 Pioneers in the Field class members, Mr. Chase Straw. Welcome.
Hey, Meg. Thanks for having me.
Well, we just had you on, so this is a back-to-back Groundskeeper Chat rendition, and I guess I will also introduce my co-host, Mr. Christopher Bell.
Well, thank you for that honor. Thank you.
Since you're here, we might as well introduce you.
Hey, Chris.
Hi, I'm just hitting record.
Oh, geez.
Somebody's got to do it.
And so we are in the thick of February. We're February 18th today. But these episodes probably will not go out until springtime, summertime. So to my future self, I hope you've made it at least 1 week without getting sick. And I also hope you have held off, Kevin, on getting a puppy, because let's just put that on the record. On February 18th, I was still strong and I was able to hold the front of not getting a puppy, but I hope my future self has remained strong. So that's my message.
Jason,
so you don't want a puppy?
I do not want a puppy.
Okay.
It only took her 1 minute to make it about her.
I know. hey, yeah.
Welcome, Chase. Now let's get back to me.
Let's talk about this puppy.
Yes. Do you have a dog?
No, but it's funny you bring that up because so moving from Texas to Pennsylvania, that was one of the stipulations that we told our oldest son because he wants a dog.
I love
and we
it.
never wanted one because we travel so much.
Yep.
But we said if we move to Pennsylvania, we'll get a dog. We didn't say when we were going to get a dog, though.
That's cool.
Yep. Keep pushing that timeline back for sure.
Yeah, but he keeps bringing it up. So I think this is going to be the year.
Well, a little something about my husband is when he's bored, he will make huge life decisions, like life altering decisions. So he had his work gave him the 2 weeks off between Christmas and New Year's. And in that time, he had way too much time to himself, and he has now completely rewrote our life's plan. And that includes a puppy. And I really do not want a dog, but we'll see. When this posts in April or May, we'll see if I was able to hold strong.
There could be more expensive midlife crises.
Oh, trust me, he's found them. He has found them, and he's now on the path of wanting a new construction home. So
wow. And
we just bought our house. So yeah, trust me, if there's an expensive endeavor, he will find it.
That's exciting.
Welcome to the Groundskeeper Chat, folks.
This is our what do they call it? Yip yapping session. You
Bonding
just start off.
Yep.
Exactly. But we've had Chase on several times. I think the first time was with Weston Floyd. You guys joined in, and I think we talked all about field testing. May have been our first episode. Yeah. And then we just had you on in Palm Springs. But I also think you were one of our first guests when we did the live Groundskeeper Chat in Savannah as well.
I think so, because I know I've done it a couple times. I couldn't remember where the first one was, though.
Yep, so you're a loyal guest, and we appreciate that. But you're also, a pillar in the industry on the academia side. And I think you and Chrissy Seegers are two people who I hold in my mind as I had no idea. When somebody said, I work for Texas A&M or Tennessee or Virginia Tech, I just assumed that the professors were also out there taking care of the fields. In my mind, that just made the most sense.
You sound like my grandma.
Yeah,
that's what she thinks. Still.
Yes, Chase teaches class and then he goes out there and, gets the field ready for Friday night.
Yep.
So I think you two were my first introduction to I could not conceptualize how you worked at the university and, also, at a university where sports were so, it's such a part of their culture, and you're a turf manager, but you never see the fields in that sense. Right. And there's so many different facets of this industry and so many different ways that you can be involved in. And you guys are those people in my mind who really opened that up for me. But tell us a little bit about that turf origin story. The whole enchilada from A to Z, how it came on your radar, how you decided to make this a career, and then really how you decided to stay in academia and not go to the other side.
Okay. Yeah, I think my origin story is very similar to most people as far as getting in the industry. Um, I was very lucky to have had a basketball coach when I was in high school, assistant basketball coach in high school. He was the head groundskeeper for the University of Kentucky. So I grew up right outside of Lexington, Kentucky. I'm from Frankfort. And so I played basketball in high school. He was the assistant coach. And he was like, I wanted to go to Kentucky mainly because of basketball, because I love basketball. Um, and he was like, do you want to come work on the grounds crew? And I was like, what are you even talking about? You
Yeah.
know, I don't even know what that means. So I can't remember exactly how it started. Um, I think right out of high school, essentially, is when I started with him. I haven't talked about this in a long time, and I don't think a lot of people know about it either. So this is kind of like the first time saying it.
I was going to say, I've probably had you, like I said, I've had you on 4 times, and I had no
Yeah,
idea that you were from Kentucky or that that's where your story started.
yeah. So it was basketball. I've gathered myself a little bit now. It was basketball. It was an assistant coach, and his name's Donnie Medford. He was the head groundskeeper at the time. He didn't end up staying there very long after I started, but he basically told me about the industry, said you get to go mow fields, and I was like, oh, this is great. Sure, that's fine. I wanted to go to Kentucky because of basketball. I had no clue what I wanted to do with my life or even what I wanted to major in. At the time, the funny thing is, at the time, I was visiting like colleges essentially to like lower D2 NIA colleges to play basketball. So Kentucky was not even one that I had even visited. My parents took me around to all these different colleges, and we spent a lot of time looking at colleges, not Kentucky. And then this guy comes and says, "Hey, do you want to go mow Kroger Field," which was Commonwealth Stadium back at the time? And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And I ended up going to Kentucky to mow grass. So of
Wow.
course my parents were like, "What are you doing?" But nonetheless, I stayed close to home, went to Kentucky, and they were glad that I was there, close to home. My parents were at least, and I had never moved away either at the time, so it was only 20 minutes away, so it was great. But I started immediately out of high school on the grounds crew at Kentucky. Started mowing fields, started painting, started doing all the fun stuff that we do as groundskeepers, and that's when I fell in love with it. Found out that I could major in it, and then ultimately majored in it. I think I declared pretty much immediately after, one semester. Once I got into it and learned a little bit more about the curriculum and whatnot. So yeah, Kentucky was great, and it seems like it was a lifetime ago. I mean, I graduated 2010, so I mean, it's only been 15 years, but it feels like it was just forever ago. But I was there for 4.5 years. I was one of only 6 turf students at the time, which is
Oh
crazy.
my
The program's
gosh.
pretty much, it's gone now. I can think out of the 6, I can only think of one that's still in the industry, and I still talk to 2 of the other 5. I guess I was one of 6, so there's 5 others. So yeah, so we were a tight knit group, and we all worked on the grounds crew. We pulled a lot of my high school friends from Frankfort went to Eastern Kentucky, and the funny thing is they have a turfgrass program, so they actually majored in a lot of them majored in turf too, but just not at Kentucky. They did it at Eastern Kentucky, and we all worked at the grounds crew. The grounds crew was kind of like mini Frankfort, Kentucky, because there were just so many of us from there. So it was really fun, good experience because it was basically hanging out with high school friends, but in college. And so from there, I got internships with the Red Sox, and that was kind of my first big move out of Kentucky experience.
Yeah, wow.
My dad's from Southern Indiana, and then my mom's from western part of Kentucky. So we would go there ever so often, but we didn't really go on a lot of out of state vacations and stuff. So out of state was like not really something I did that much growing up. I went, but just not that often. So when I moved to Boston, it was a big ordeal for my mom and whatnot, especially the first year because I went twice. So
Okay.
it was a big deal, big life experience for me. I did that, I think, between my sophomore and my junior year for the first time. Interned up there for 3 months with Dave Meller. Honestly, it was a grind. Anybody that's done that internship, especially back when I did it, it was pretty tough, mentally and physically, just because of the hours you had to work and just it's every single day. That's where I met Weston Applefeller. He was the second assistant at the time, so he was low on the totem pole.
And you were also, is this the time when you were sleeping on Ryan Bajorn's couch?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, no, he was sleeping on mine. That was the second.
Okay,
That was the
okay.
second year, though. Yeah, so the first year he was off somewhere else. I can't remember where he was the first year, but the second year, a lot of the UMass guys stuck around for the summer, and so yeah, the second. So I went back up there the following year again, because one of my best friends from back home in Kentucky actually got an internship up there. And I was like, hey, if you go, I'll go.
Yeah.
And I was 21 the second year. So that obviously
Nice.
made a big difference too.
Made things different.
So that was the year. Yeah. Bajorn slept on the couch. That was the funnest year because I already kind of knew what to expect.
Yeah.
The mental grind I was prepared for a little bit better. And I had one of my best friends up there with me too. So that was fun. But, they have like 10 interns each year, if not more. So not only did I get to meet the assistants really well, they were up there, met a ton of other kids from all across the country. Really opened my eyes up to, there's things outside of the University of Kentucky, because that was always one of my dream jobs, was just to land that gig. So yeah, then came back senior year and then met Darren Daly at the Cincinnati Bengals. And James Lavity. I've been lucky with the assistants. So James was the assistant with Darren when I was there. I interned with them for basically 7 months, from about May to the end of the season, in December. And so that was 2010, I believe. So in the summer I lived up there because my brother lived in Cincinnati. But in the fall, I had 3 classes and I scheduled them strategically on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Tuesday, Thursday, I would drive up to Cincinnati and work. So I really liked going up there, and then I would work on the weekends too, because I loved NFL football. Still do love NFL football. And I think if I was to redo everything, I would definitely go NFL football just because I love NFL so much. But it was there that I met. So there was a group kind of towards the end of the internship, a group from the University of Tennessee came up, and it was all the researchers, graduate students, John Sorokin, a lot of the names you're familiar with. Adam Tomes was a grad student at the time, and some of the other faculty members from Tennessee came up and did a tour. And so Darren told me about the tour, and I said, and he asked if I would help, and I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, you're my boss. I'll do whatever you want me to. Yep. So that's when I really found out about grad school, because I met a gentleman by the name of Tom Samples. And anybody that's in the academic world, he's retired now. He was an extension professor down at Tennessee. It's actually Becky Grubbs Bowling. Do you know Becky? Have you met her?
I feel like I've seen the name on social media, but I don't think I've ever met her in person.
Okay. Her and Chrissy are really good friends. So,
okay. Yep. That must be where I have.
Yeah, and then her and I went to grad school together at Georgia too, but she's now in Tom Samples' current position.
Okay.
But he was kind of a pillar. He's one of those just guys that when you talk to him, makes you feel like he can run through a wall.
Yeah.
And even though my GPA was not amazing whatsoever as an undergrad, he was like, "Oh, you need to come down and do a master's with John. John's gonna love doing a master's, having you as a master's student." And I was like, all right. So I applied, didn't get into Tennessee because my grades were terrible. I applied everywhere and really didn't get in. I applied to probably 4 or 5 schools and didn't get in. And then, but I had my mind set at that point that I wanted to do grad school because I'd already done MLB. I'd already done NFL. Yeah. I'd already done collegiate athletics. And I was starting to get really serious with my now wife. And I was like, she's not going to, fly with the weekends and all this stuff. As much as I like football, she's going to want me home for most of these weekends. So that's when I started really getting, and I've always had kind of a curious mind with research, even though I had no clue how research worked and whatnot. I was always very interested in it. So I kind of made my mind at that moment that I wanted to do grad school, the more that I dove into it. So that's 2010. And then so after getting denied a million times from universities,
relentless.
Yeah, I just kept going, and I'll never forget it. So I had another PhD student at the University of Kentucky. So towards the end there, I was working for the Bengals, and I was working with his name's David Williams. He was the turfgrass professor at Kentucky. I was working with him as kind of like an undergraduate researcher, but I was helping another PhD student, and the PhD student kept forwarding me all these graduate research assistantship positions that were opening all across the country. And I would apply and not get accepted probably or hear anything back. And I'll never forget, I was in bed asleep and I heard my phone go off at like 1 a.m. and it was him forwarding me a position at Texas Tech University.
Okay.
And I looked at it and I was like, there's no way I'm moving to Lubbock, Texas. But 2 days later, I emailed the professor, who's Gerald Henry. Do you know Gerald? Meg?
I've not met Gerald either.
Okay, he's at Georgia. He's at Georgia now, but I emailed him and he was like, "Yeah, I'm super interested in you. Come out to Lubbock for a visit." And I was like, "Really?" And so he flew me out. That was on my birthday too. I'll never forget. It was like my 23rd birthday because I sat around. I was with my in-laws and I was with my parents, and my wife had never moved out of Kentucky either, and all of her family's literally in the Lexington area. And I remember being at our birthday dinner somewhere, saying that we were potentially moving to Lubbock, Texas, and everybody's face just kind of turned white.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. So anyway, we did that. Went to Texas Tech. Gerald went to after a semester in. Gerald moved to Georgia. He said, "Good news, you can come with me." I was like, "That's awesome," because as much as I like Lubbock, West Texas is great, nice people. Let's get back to the Southeast.
Yeah.
Took me to Georgia with him. Stayed there for about 5.5 years doing my master's and my PhD. That's when I really fell in love with the sports field research, with all the connections that I had made as an undergrad. Really helped out a lot, having that practical experience from the research side of it. So it was a really good 5.5 years. Gerald was great. I owe Gerald a lot for taking a chance on me. He knew that my grades were terrible, but he saw something in me, kind of a niche on my, it was always been a little niche, little chip on my shoulder, I guess. So in grad school, I made sure that I did very well with grades. And I did because I knew I could. I just didn't really apply myself very hard as an undergrad. So did master's PhD at Georgia with Gerald, did a lot of sports field research. Didn't really have a lot of opportunities coming out of my PhD because a lot of the positions at the university, the faculty positions, they just weren't open. People weren't retiring yet, or the jobs weren't getting filled. So I didn't want to do one, but I'm glad I did looking back on it. But I had an opportunity to do a postdoc. So a postdoc is basically like an in-between. Once you graduate with your PhD, you go off for a year or two, sometimes longer, get a little bit more experience as a faculty member, but you're really staff under a faculty member, but you're trying to kind of treat it and you're almost expected to act like a faculty member. So you learn to do things like write grants, write papers, run your own program to a certain extent, but not have that pressure of actually being the faculty member. So I did that at the University of Minnesota. Great experience. Had really good mentors there, Brian Horgan and Eric Watkins. Eric is still there, and I think he's vice provost. And then Brian Horgan just became a dean out at UC Cal Poly, is it UC Cal Poly? I think it's just Cal Poly. So they've done great. But it was there that I really started dipping my toes in golf. And so I did a lot of golf research when I was in Minnesota. I was still able to dabble in the sports field work. But I was able to do more golf research, which really broadened my skill set for whenever I did start applying for faculty jobs. Texas A&M job came open probably about a year into my postdoc, applied for that. That was really the only other faculty job that I applied for ever. And so I took it because it was a good job. Loved it there, did a lot of really cool stuff at Texas A&M. It's a great university. It was a great position. This position that I'm in now at Penn State, when they come knocking, you got to listen. And when I listened, it was hard to turn down. So now a month and a half in, I don't regret anything. Definitely miss Texas, miss everybody there. Miss Weston for sure. Need to find me a Weston up here. But miss the students. Students are awesome. But I know that'll happen here as I continue to hopefully build my program here. But that's the long story of how I got here.
So Chase, let's say we have that magical time machine and we go back to aspiring 17, 18-year-old D2 basketball player, Chase Straw. And you tells yourself, hey, you're going to be assistant professor at Penn State University for turfgrass. How does young you react to that?
I got a story that I was going to I'm waiting to tell until when I retire. I'll say that it's a shock. Never would have imagined it. Because, going up through the coming up through undergrad and going to SFMA, there's these big faces you see, especially in the academic world, professors, and then especially once you get to grad school and you start becoming familiar with the programs, you learn a little bit more about the programs and the research coming out of the programs, and then the people behind that.
Yeah.
And to be, well, one, even Texas A&M, like being there and some of the names, because, I was in the position of Jim Beard, who was one of the fathers of turfgrass science there. So, I mean, those are big shoes too. And then I'm obviously in some big shoes right now that I need to fill. So, I would, if you would, ask Weston Applefeller when you interview him how he introduced me my very first job, or very first presentation at Texas A&M was in front of MLS groundskeepers. I was excited, young professor trying to make a name for myself, and he introduces me, and he says, "This is probably the guy that I would least expect to be a professor."
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
Yeah, he was obviously kidding, but that's how well me and Weston got together. But that was my first introduction ever for a presentation as a professor.
That is so funny. And you talked a little bit about like the chip on your shoulder about in undergrad not having the best marks, but do you think that's helped you now in the professor side, where you can seek out those people that just have the potential but aren't applying themselves and kind of relate to them? Because I think like at least in my time in school, like the people that were in academia or at professor levels are the ones who just excelled throughout school their entire, like they really were just the ones that like it comes so naturally to them to want to dive deeper into research or want to be in a classroom setting. But for you, it sounds like you may have this ability to like empathize or really see their point of view that could potentially help them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having that chip on my shoulder is definitely, it helps me. Well, one, I'm just like everybody else, because there's people that struggle through college, the organic chemistry, like I don't even know how I passed that. Even some of the other ones. Now I've gotten better over time, but there's going through college is a grind, especially when you got work. That was always my focus as an undergrad. And my grades suffered because of that. Like I wanted to go work. I worked 40, 50 hours like a lot of people in our industry do, while also trying to do school. But I think I learned at an early age how to balance that, because even now I work a lot, but I also know kind of when to pull back on whatever, like, okay, I'm not really spending a lot of time out networking and talking to people and getting, some FaceTime out there with maybe presentations or something. Maybe I need to quit with the grant writing and the publications for a little while and try to ease my way back into that so that I'm relevant on that side of things. But, and then, tie it back around to the grants and the publications, some of the scientific stuff too. So it's a big balance. And I think I definitely learned that coming up. And I think my practical experience has made me very relatable to a lot of people in the industry. And it's helped me with my research. The fundamentals are something that the scientific theory and all that was stuff that I got in grad school, stuff that I'm still learning, I honestly, because there's just so much. So I try not to ever stop learning. But the theory part of it kind of came with time. And now that I'm kind of getting a hold on the theory and then applying my practical, it's all tying together. And then, early on, I started to feel like when somebody said, "Oh, we got an expert here," blah, 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 I'm like, I hope they don't ask me this question. I feel a little bit more comfortable answering any question, honestly. And to be honest with you, if I don't know the answer, I'm just going to tell you I don't know, or I'm going to find somebody else that knows.
You definitely got the toolkit, like all those, those huge pillars, those people that have been a part of your story. Like you have the toolkit to, reference to them. And I think that's something that's so unique about the industry is how so many people's story sounds like that, where it's like, I spent time with this person who was such a pillar in the industry, or I was, on the Nielsen Mafia, or I worked with, Andy McNitt, like all these people that are just like, they're the reason that our industry has this network and this camaraderie for sure.
Yep. I agree. And the camaraderie is the best part.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and so, one of the personality traits I think that is so important for people to have in this industry is that willingness or, almost like the bravery to move and leave home. Because, that's something that I always admire that people are able to do in this industry. Go to Boston one summer and then be willing to go to Minnesota and then be in Texas. Like, what are some of those other personality traits that you think people need to have in order to be successful in this industry? And really twofold question, like which of those do you think that you possess that have made you successful?
That's a tough one. I'm very fortunate that I got a saint for a wife. Obviously, she runs everything back home, especially with three little kids, and she's like, go do you, and and I try to do the same for her. Go do you too. But a lot of times she's stuck with the kids because I'm off going and doing me. So,
Yeah.
and I understand that. So, and I try to pay that back to her. If not now, hopefully down the road, because hopefully I can start bringing her to some of these places that I get to go. But that's number one, is to just have a foundation. And I think family, balancing it's hard. My son wants to stay up and watch WWE wrestling all the time, Monday, Friday wrestling, but I'm sitting there on my computer and he's like, Dad, you're not watching. And I'm like, buddy, I got to do this. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's days that I try to close the computer and watch, but some days I got to sit there and work during it. He wants me to play PlayStation with him. Trust me, I want to play PlayStation with you all day long, but I can't. So, balancing that is big. So having a family and being able to have that to fall back on is definitely number one. I think moving is a big thing, and moving was a big reason why we almost didn't come to Pennsylvania, just because it's just and gosh, it was, not only is it expensive, but it's just so time consuming, and it always ends up being harder than you think. But we were thinking long term. Long term, we knew that the first couple years were going to be rough, just transition with the kids and everything. But long term, this is definitely probably the best choice. I don't know what trait that is, but I guess I have kind of a characteristic where it's like, let's see where this goes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not just a uneducated decision. Like, we really thought it through, weighed the pros and cons, short term and long term. We're actually closer. This is the closest we've lived to Kentucky since we've moved from Kentucky. So, that's a big pro, obviously. But yeah, I think just having that foundation, family, to help weigh those pros and cons, and then just having that characteristic, I guess, of hopefully this works out, fingers crossed, but at the same time, making an educated decision about it. So this was obviously a really good program and choice. So the decision wasn't too hard, but I did love Texas A&M.
So, and it sounds like your wife and your family really serve as that, that foundation where I'm sure when you have big decisions like that, it's, a team behind you making those decisions. But who are some of the other people in the industry that, you either call on or who have really influenced your career path? Whether it was a call where they just really encouraged you, or, just having the opportunity to work with them kind of changed your path in a way.
Yeah. I think there's a lot. I think on the practitioner side, definitely folks like Weston Applefeller and James Lavity. Unfortunately, two of my biggest mentors coming up, who, I think about it a lot, how they would react if they knew where I ended up. Darren Daly, before he passed away, and then my old advisor at the university, well, both of my advisors at the University of Kentucky, Dr. A.J. Powell and Dr. David Williams. A.J. Powell was really old school, and when he found out I wanted to do grad school, I think he kind of looked at it as somebody from the University of Kentucky continuing the legacy of University of Kentucky, because I don't think, aside from him and David Williams, they were the only ones to come out of there with a PhD. I think since there's been maybe one more, but after me, but I know they'd be really excited to see where I was. So those three, especially David Williams, AJ Powell, and Darren Daly, definitely. But as far as, people, other people, I mean, the list is super long. I think early on, Marcus Dean is a big one. He ended up being the head groundskeeper at Kentucky after Donnie Mefford left. So I worked under him for several years, and he and I have always remained close. He took me with him to SFMA when I was an undergrad student. I was the only one from Kentucky that would typically go, and I know we went at least a couple times, he and I together, and he'd let me stay in his room and whatnot. So he was always pushing me to get more involved in the industry, and we remain friends to this day. We don't talk quite as much as we used to, but he would visit in Texas with his new position, and so we stay in touch quite a bit. And then Weston Apfeller, of course. Looking back on it, it's funny. You never really know how relationships are going to evolve because he was running around with his head, on fire, essentially the year I was in Boston with him. And then he moves on to Austin FC. I think he went straight to Austin FC. I can't remember. And then I end up in Texas too. And it just becomes kind of random. And then that relationship reignites. And, we've stayed in really good, close touch since, and we talk quite frequently now still. So he's definitely a big one. And then there's a lot of other ones that they probably don't even know that they influence me as much as they would probably think that I influence them more just because they're like my students. A lot of students coming out A&M that graduated, they say things to me that keep me going as far as maybe they enjoy class or maybe they're thankful for some opportunity that they think I gave them, but they probably were the ones that did it. So the students, that's the most rewarding thing. And that's really, looking back on it, the biggest reason why I wanted to get into academia was for teaching. I fell in love with the research, and I still do love the research, but the teaching is very rewarding too. And honestly, it played a big role in coming up here because I just saw that those student numbers could be massive because they already are massive here. So that there would be students sprinkled all over the world, which would be really cool to have. The long list of those people. And then you got the sports field managers that I work with on a day-to-day basis. The ones in Texas were awesome. Weston was great, even though he's my research technician, but like Brad Finn and Nick McKenna, all those guys that I get to work with. And I don't even really work with them. We just hang out, because I was there for 5 years and I would just go visit Nick, and Nick would, call and we'd talk randomly. And a lot of times it wasn't even about turf. So, there's a lot of people, long list, and I'd have to sit down and really think of it. But those are the ones that come to mind.
So Chase, you like you mentioned, you had a long list of people who were influential to you, and you talk about the importance of students and the opportunity you have there. At the end of your career, if you could describe how a perfect world would be, what would your legacy be? Would you hope it to be?
I'm hoping when I'm 50, everybody will just take care of me and I don't have to do anything. That's a loaded question. I don't know. Yeah. My wife jokes at me because, she knows this is true. Like, I'm going to be that professor that dies in his office because I just literally don't think that, I don't believe this is work. Like, I really don't. I feel like this is the hardest that I'm going to have to work probably the next decade or so as I get settled and get things in place. But at Texas A&M, I already had things kind of dialed in the way that I wanted. I had a great support staff. I understood the university. The students were, I was starting to get a feel for the students and how to place them, and I had the network and all that going. I was getting to that point to where I don't want to say I was sit back, but I want to focus on these big picture things in turf. And I was working towards that in Texas. So now I'm kind of starting over at Penn State with getting the teaching going and trying to hire grad students and a research technician. But eventually I want to get to where everything's in place here, and then I can focus on some of these bigger issues in the industry. Like, the big one that I'm working on right now is community level sports fields. Like, how do we provide communities with the information that they need to make more informed decisions about their sports fields? And that's a very loaded question. That's not just management. That's way beyond turfgrass science, construction. There's economic components, there's health, safety. And so that's what I'm trying to do right now, that I think will be hopefully a part of my legacy one day is to tackle these kind of bigger issues, even beyond our industry, that will hopefully help push the sports field manager forward or up.
That's
Very
great.
cool.
That could be extremely impactful, honestly.
Yeah.
And are you connected with Ryan DeMay at all?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
that's very much his, passion as well, is that community level sports fields. And I do think anytime I've asked him about legacy, it's like that's, students and community, like that's where it starts, the user groups, and then the students who are going to start, their turf careers in your classroom. So probably without even having to think about it too much, that will just naturally be your legacy, is all those people that you get to impact and, have their story start right there with you, and how cool that is.
Yeah. And circling back to the students, that's another thing. That's always been a dream of mine when I started grad school, is to be a faculty member somewhere that has students and they just be all over the place. And then when my kids are old and out of the house and me and my wife are looking for somewhere to go, I can say, hey, I know a guy there. Let's go here. Yeah. And then just go visit. So that would be really cool, I think. And one day I'll probably get to do that, I would assume.
I'll have to talk to your wife and see if that's her dream, her retirement dream. It's going to sports fields with you.
Hey, you only have to visit for like an hour.
Oh, that's
it's
great.
A business trip after that. Yeah, it's a business trip. Just visit for an hour and you're good.
Yep. I love it. I love it. So who are you like in your element? And when I say that, like, where are you the most confident, the most comfortable professionally? Like, is that in front of a classroom? Is it, diving deep into research? Is it out on the field still? Who are you really when you're in your element and just grooving? Chris likes that word, grooving.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the only time I'm really out of my element is when I'm talking about myself. So
this is perfect.
I don't want to, and I don't want to say this is hard, but it's just like I got to think about it, because I never really like sit and think about it. But I mean, I love being in the classroom, especially if it's a class that I've taught. So I really enjoy the class I'm teaching right now that I took over for Dr. McNitt. I really enjoy it, but it's not mine. It's still his. So I'm really excited for the summer to roll around and try kind of tweak it. It's going to take, a year or two to get it the way that I want it. And it was taught really well in the past, but it was his, right? So I'm just trying to morph it into what the way that I would teach it. So once I get that in place, and I kind of had that in place at Texas A&M, like I really enjoyed teaching because you just get to interact with the students, and I feel like I'm just kind of in my element with that. Site visits, I love when people come visit me. Early on at Texas A&M, I used to get, I kind of took it personal when like a salesperson came and visited Nick and didn't come say hey to me. And I think over time it became, okay, we're going to see Chase and Nick. And so every time, somebody visited, they would either be coming from him or going to him. And, I wanted that because I want people to feel welcome. I want people to come, visit the research facility, know what we have going on, meet the students. I always try to get the students involved. I think that's probably when I'm most in my element. I had a class at Texas A&M where I took students to golf courses and sports fields and took them on field trips. It was basically like their capstone course. And I just loved seeing their face whenever I took them to like one of the top golf courses in Texas and interact with the assistant and the head director of agronomy. And they realize like, hey, these are just normal people too. They put them on these pedestals, but they're just regular old people that are looking to hire somebody like them. So being kind of the middleman for that, I take a lot of pride in that. And then when something actually works out, then it's like, that's awesome. And I'm glad that they were able to follow through. But yeah, I mean, I love my research. I definitely feel like I'm in my zone with my research. Research is a little tricky because, as a scientist, we're trained skeptics. So whenever you go to publish or anytime you do research, like that's kind of the point of our job, is to be skeptic and to ask questions and say, why did you do it this way? Why did you do it that way? So the whole publishing process, the grant writing process, that can be really frustrating. But once you get past it, I got kind of thick skin. It's kind of like, dang, that sucks that they said that, but then I kind of get over it. Some people let it linger, and it maybe would prevent them from submitting a grant or submitting a paper. And, I'm just like, let's just go for it.
Yeah.
And the feedback will hopefully help make it better. We'll see. So, I feel most of my element probably with the students and visiting friends and stuff, but I do love the research part. And whenever something does come through with the research that is good and people like and it gets published, that's a really good feeling too.
Definitely. And, I think that goes back to, I'm struggling to put like a term to it, but I think that goes back to that personality trait of just willingness to be rejected or fail or, have something not be successful, and willingness to come back the next day and keep working at it must be like a personality trait that you need for this industry as well. Because like, your field could fail one day, and, being able to come back and hear the criticism or hear the ways that you've failed and put it into practice and make it better is, a necessity.
Yep. Yep. I agree. And, where that might be a good trait for my job, my wife probably, yeah, she would have an opinion about it, because sometimes I'm like, it'll work out. And she's like, no, I need you to like do this or figure this out or something. And I'm like, I will when I get to it. So I kind of have it's kind of a win-lose situation. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause she thinks I'm too, so one of my nicknames, playing baseball growing up was Cadillac. And it was because I was just so easygoing all the time. And, and I don't know why it was Cadillac, but, that was why they named me that, because I was
love
easy.
that.
And my wife, she likes that trait about me. And I think a lot of people like that trait about me because I'm kind of easygoing. But at the same time, sometimes I need to probably put the foot to the pedal and get something done.
I love it. Well, it makes you so approachable, and especially in the academia side, I think that's so important, because you kind of talked a little bit about like how we naturally put people on pedestals, and we can kind of create this own intimidation factor. And I will say, like, naturally, I think a professor or somebody on the academia side, you just have them, on this pedestal. But having that easygoing nature just makes you more approachable, and obviously just helps students have that relationship with you to where they can be transparent, or they can share their passions or projects that they're excited about and things like that.
Yep. Yeah, that's one thing that I try to do the most, is just be approachable and be available. Communication's big. I get on my students a lot about that. If I text you or email you, I expect some kind of response. It doesn't have to be immediately. Within 24 hours would be nice.
Yeah.
My grad students, at least, because it's such an important thing, not only in the industry, but just in life in general, to be approachable, to be accessible. I feel like that's how I've gotten the opportunities that I've gotten. And so I just try to relay that message to my students as well.
Definitely. So yeah, being communicative, I think that's the word, approachable, available. What are some of those other philosophies that you feel like, have become like pillars or core to your career, or how you run the classroom, or how you just, navigate life in general?
I work really hard. That's a lot of, I don't know if I work smart, but I work hard. And you kind of have to work that way, at least for what I do. Because teaching maybe like a new concept or learning something new for research, you can't just wing it. So, I spend hours upon hours of doing my homework, of researching things even before I start. And that's just the phase one. And then you have to write a grant, and that takes forever. And then it's got to get approved, and that takes forever. And then in the background, you got all this other administrative stuff that people don't see at all. Like every little thing that I buy to submit a receipt and justify it, travel expenses, all these other little silly things, trainings, all these university trainings and whatnot. So, I work a lot, and I think I work really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important trait. And I get that from my grandpa. He just retired, and the only reason he retired is because he had to have a pacemaker put in. But he's 86, and he
Oh
just
my
retired, and
gosh.
he probably would
Wow.
have kept going. My dad's the same way. My dad retired last year. He lasted 3 months, and then he went back to work.
I love
So
that.
it just kind of runs in the family. I got that from them probably. Even my mom's dad was he worked all the way up until he passed away as a tobacco farmer in Kentucky. So it's just the straw men have always worked until they've basically kicked the bucket.
I love
And
it.
that's just in our genes. So I
I
think
love
that's
it.
another one is just hard work. And,
Yeah.
if I got my mindset on something, I'm going to at least try to, I'm going to, I'm going to at least try to do it. It might not be
Mhm.
great, but I'm going to try.
What did your dad do?
My dad was a truck driver.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
my dad was a
you
truck driver it's similar to like a UPS, but more local.
okay.
Yeah, it's local. And then my mom was a secretary. Neither one of my parents. So I'm a first generation college graduate too. I
Mhm.
don't really talk about that much either.
That's
But I was the
amazing.
first in my entire family to get a degree, which is a big deal. My brother ended up getting one eventually. My brother's 3 years older than me. He ended up getting one. Took him about 9 years, nonstop. He actually stayed in school. I was like, man, that's impressive.
Oh, wow. Full time.
Yeah, but he ended up getting a degree.
Tommy boy.
So that was a big thing, and I know our parents were really proud of us for that. He's the only one. He's my only sibling. But yeah, to be able to get a degree and then to see them, my dad's always been a truck driver, but my mom, she started out as a secretary at some law firm, I believe, when we were young, and she worked her way up in the state government to where she was in human resources. She ended up being vice president, really high position. So just
Wow.
being able to see her kind of work her way up was pretty cool and obviously inspiring because she didn't have a college degree. I think she barely even ended up out of high school because just back then, growing up in like rural Kentucky, they just didn't finish high school. It was just normal not to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, my grandpa was a tobacco farmer. My grandma never worked. Um, I think they literally had the dirt floors, which was kind of crazy. And I remember visiting them when I was a kid. They passed away when I was pretty young, but I do remember like going to their house, and it was literally in the middle of a tobacco farm with very small dirt floor.
And that's where your mom grew up.
Yeah, yeah,
That's wild. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. And I know it's like hard to think back to, I always look back with like rose-colored glasses, but like growing up and seeing your parents with that kind of work ethic, do you think that just instilled something in you to, have the same pursuits in a sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I think it's just natural. I think it's just in our genetics without even
Mm-hmm.
trying. It took me a while to figure it out because I did not have this work ethic in high school or in college.
Okay.
And it's like
Well,
at all.
give yourself more credit. You were working 40 to 50-hour weeks
So
and
yeah, so that was my mindset was to work
Mhm.
hard and not smart from the school perspective because I just went all in on working and that's all I cared about. And I don't know what clicked for me. To be honest with you, I think it was my wife and she'd probably take the credit for it too. Where something just clicked and was like, all right, I gotta figure out what I gotta do and then I gotta just sit and do it. Yeah, and I don't know there wasn't one moment in time that I can remember that.
Mhm.
I just think I don't want to say got lucky, but I guess I kind of did falling into the little path that I've gotten and meeting the people I've gotten to meet. And then obviously having my wife because she's moved 5 states now with me. This is definitely the last one, she said. But just to have somebody that's like, okay, let's do it. I trust you, and so that's obviously big,
No,
and I don't
that's
take that for granted.
That's incredible. I definitely don't think I could ever be that kind of partner. So like that's like a once in a lifetime for sure. Very cool. And thinking back to, how you perceived your parents and kind of the point of view you had on them, what do you hope like your kids see through, it is hard to sometimes maintain that work-life balance, but what do you really hope they gather from why is it important for them to know that you love what you do when you go to work?
Yeah, that's funny. That's a conversation that I actually had with my 10-year-old this weekend. I can't remember what brought it up. Something about working. He was asking me about going somewhere because I was supposed to go somewhere last week. And, I told him, like, I don't feel like I'm working when I'm working. And he was
Mm-hmm.
like, what do you mean? And I was like, if you get a job that you love, you don't feel like you're working. And I said, you should probably start thinking about it. I mean, even though you're in fourth grade, start thinking about like what do you love to do,
Yeah.
and go for it. And I feel like I just got lucky falling into it because I didn't know what I wanted to do out of high school, like I said, and I just fell into this, and I loved it, and I love sports. Still love sports, which is another big motivational factor to do any of this because I get to go to really cool places where
Yep.
sports are. So yeah, I mean, I want them, even though I want them to see me work hard, but I also want them to see me enjoy stuff. The last month has been really stressful just because starting a new job is always stressful. So I've had to kind of put on a face when I'm really stressed in front of them. Hopefully, they see the face and not how I really feel because
Yeah.
it's just like, because I have three boys. I haven't said that yet on this podcast. I think I've told you before, but I got three little boys, so they're always wanting to wrestle, fight, play games,
Mm-hmm.
go outside in the snow, do all this stuff. And I'm at the point right now where I just can't.
Mm-hmm.
It'll get better soon, but starting a new job's tough. So you got a lot of things you got to do. So I'm working a lot, and I think they were starting to recognize it. And that's one of those things where, okay, I probably need to dial it back at least a little bit. But it's a trade-off. So I would spend a little bit more time playing the games and whatnot with them, but I would stay up later and work longer.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe not spend as much time with my wife. So it's a balance. So you got
Yeah.
to balance it all. And I try not to step over too much. But when it comes to, what I hope they see me working hard. I hope they see me really enjoying it. And I hope they just use that. I think regardless, they're straw men. So they're going to have the genes that we
Yeah.
have probably. Because my brother's the same way. He works all the time too. So they're probably going to have it naturally. But I just hope they pursue something that they really are passionate for and that they really love. And so I'm hoping that they see that with what I do.
Definitely. And why is this job so much more than a 9 to 5? And I mean that not in the hour sense. Like we all know that this profession requires long hours, but how does this job really like almost kind of define you as a person? It's not one of those clock in, clock out operations where you can be a completely different person outside of the job. It kind of is ingrained in who you are. And how do you really like, I guess, put that into words?
Yeah, and I get asked that a lot because a lot of like people outside of the industry, like my family, they don't really understand what I do, and they're like, "Why are
Mm-hmm.
you working all this time?" Um, the way that I describe it to them is I'm basically like the CEO of my own company.
Mm-hmm.
I work under the umbrella of a university, but depending on how hard I work, how much I go out and network, how much grants I write, how many students I bring in, graduate students, that defines who I am as a professor, turfgrass professor. So I could easily just do the minimum and nobody know who I am, but I'm checking the university boxes with student reviews and all this stuff, maybe bringing in a little money, doing a little research. But you don't really, to me, it's not really beneficial to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I moved from Texas, one of the big questions I got from recently is, what are you going to do when you get to Penn State? And the answer to that is I'm going to do the exact same thing I was doing at Texas A&M
Yeah.
because I'm essentially the CEO of my own brand, of my own program. And even though I'm under that umbrella of a different university, it still packs up and comes with me. Now, the minimal requirements for like teaching and whatnot, they change obviously with a new position. But as far as the research and things that I pursue, the things that I'm interested in, those aren't going to change a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to explain that to my grandma. She still doesn't understand. She still thinks like you that I mow the grass for the field. And she's wondering how I'm doing that in February right now in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, she's like, why the hell are you working so hard?
Yeah.
You're
She's like,
really
what are
not
you
working
doing?
smarter.
Yeah. And, academia is weird. It really is because, we have research, we have teaching, and we have extension. Those are the three
Mm-hmm.
pillars of academia. And, a lot of people think that teaching is the bulk of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be from a time consumption standpoint, But really what we get evaluated on are research grants, publications, putting out grad students, not necessarily teaching undergraduate courses, which is a shame to a certain extent, but the university wants to see us bring in research dollars and bring in prestige in that sense. So the teaching, while it's time consuming, on paper I have 40%, but it's 10% really of my job. Really it's networking, providing resources to the public, research, grants, dollars, all that. So.
And you said the word brand. So, of course, like a bell went off in my head because that's my favorite topic to talk about. But how important is it for you to have a brand and not only to attract students to your program, but to have that network in the community and with user groups and with the extension? How important is it to have that visibility where people can put a name and a face to, the money that's being moved around or the projects that need to get approved? How much of that is a part of your job?
Yeah, it's big because if people don't know who you are, then you don't get those opportunities.
Yep.
Which is why it's really important to end up at a really good school with the program because you can essentially leverage the students, right? And I used to do it at Texas A&M all the time. When I was trying to get research or maybe get new pieces of equipment, demos, we're training the up and coming students. So let us demo, some of your equipment or use it for our research or whenever we write grants, somehow tie students in. And so that's important. And so having your brand and being somebody that's, like we talked about earlier, relatable, approachable, prompt. That's a big one. Like I just always respond, even if it's just, hey, I got your message, I'm out of town this week. I don't ever do an email thing when I'm out of town. Like I don't even know how to set that up. And I don't get frustrated with people that do it, but it's just like, I get emails on my phone. There's no reason why I can't. If it's important, then I can just be like, hey, I'm out of town, or hey, can I call you real quick?
Yeah.
So I've never been one of those like set up the email, I'm out of town for 10 days type, because realistically, you're checking your email anyway when you set that up, because so many people respond to me after I get one of those messages. So it's like, what's the point of doing that anyway? If you're like 100% extension, I get it, because the extension, some of the like homeowner questions, I don't get those types of questions.
Okay,
I could understand letting them know that, but generally speaking, like when I'm out of town, I don't ever put up one of those email things. I can't remember your original question, but I just went off on a tangent.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I actually got a couple of them this morning, and I was like, man, they've been gone for a long time.
It's like when people go on Do Not Disturb now, I'm always the person that says notify anyway. And like the message goes really quick.
Yeah. My wife will put it on Do Not Disturb, and if you call twice in a row, the second time it'll actually ring.
Nice.
I'm just like, why are you doing this?
They've probably got a better handle on life than we do, but I definitely I never respect those situations.
Boundaries, Meg.
I know. Trust me. I'm in a family that we don't know what the word means. Boundaries. What is that? Chris, I have one more question for Chase, but I didn't know if you had any lingering questions before I ask the final one.
No, go ahead. Go with the final one because we don't want to take up too much more of Chase's valuable time.
Yes, definitely. We have. I have been so fascinated by your story because it is incredible that we've managed to do 4 of these, and I really hadn't heard so much of the story before, which is just a tribute to probably you being very humble and not like me in any way. So, but my last question is, who are you really outside of the classroom? Who are you at home? Like, what are those things that you want people to know when they read this profile? Like who Chase is with his family or who he is on the weekends? What are those elements that you hope people take away?
I try to be the exact same person in front of everybody. And I think that might be one of the qualities. I don't know that people think that draw people to me. What you see is what you get. To be honest, I mean, I'm the same at home. I really like sports. I'm kind of a nerd. I play video games with my kids. We go to the movies. We love Marvel stuff. We love Game of Thrones. Me and my wife, we love all the nerdy stuff. We love American Idol. That's like a big thing. Like my kids are into now.
That's amazing.
We love to travel. eventually basketball. You know, we have a big passion for basketball. My son likes basketball, so we got him a high school regulation basketball in-ground goal last year in Texas that we brought up with us. We dug it up out of the ground and brought it with
Oh
us to
my
Pennsylvania.
gosh.
So I was finally getting to the point in Texas where all the neighborhood kids would come to our house and play basketball, and I would just be that guy, just
That is the
play.
dream. Oh my
Yeah, so
gosh.
they're almost at the prime, like 13 or 14, where I'm still better than them, but they're still good, kind of good.
Yep.
And so I really look forward to that day where I can play like 3-on-3 with some of the kids and just swat them and get it out of there.
I love it.
So yeah, I mean that's who I am. I love sports. I love Kentucky. I love Cincinnati Bengals. That's never going to change. I've been at all these universities. Everybody's like, "Oh, you've been at Georgia, you've been at Texas A&M, you've been at Penn State. Way better programs than University of Kentucky." But one of the big reasons, me and Nick McKenna, I always joked with him, I never went to a Texas A&M game until my very last year.
Oh my
I think it was like
gosh.
the second to the last home game at Texas A&M, and everybody would always assume that I just went to all the games, and I'm like, I can't miss Kentucky football. It's just too big of a deal to me. So
I
I
love that.
just love it. Yeah, and I'm raising my kids to be that way too, which I'm happy. Although my oldest might be a Georgia fan, which is fine. That's okay. But he wants to follow in the same footsteps as me, but he wants to do it in reverse, he said. He doesn't want to do turfgrass. He hasn't talked about that, but he wants to go to Georgia as an undergrad. Then he wants to go to graduate school at Kentucky. And I was like, well, what do you want to go to graduate school for? And he has no clue even what graduate school is. So
Nice.
we're still learning about that.
Awesome.
That's incredible. Well, and where do you guys like to travel? Are you like national parks or you like to be on the beach?
Yeah, both. National parks are cool. Beach is good. Right now we're planning a Universal Studios trip. Hopefully,
Okay, nice.
Elizabeth's sister, my wife, Elizabeth has a sister that lives in Daytona, so that's always nice down in Florida. So we got a good reason to go to Florida ever so often. So yeah, just anywhere, everywhere. That's the thing. We like adventures. That's one thing that we want to get here in the next probably 4 or 5 years is an RV. So that we can take the kids around with us on some road trips before they get out of the house. But eventually that's what me and my wife want to do is get an RV and just drive around, travel around. We just like going places.
I love that. And that's definitely the dream. And yeah, having all the kids in the neighborhood kids at your house and then loading up the RV, those are like my two dreams.
Yep. The neighborhood kids is a lot.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's really cool because we were getting to that point to where every day after school, we were within walking distance of the school. We would have like 8 kids at our house at least, and they would only grow as our youngest got older. But the fact that they want to be at our house kind of says a lot, and we don't want that to change. So
No, I love that. That's so cool. Well, I really appreciate all the time you're able to give us today. Is there anything else you want to leave us with before we turn you loose?
I don't think so. Thanks for the interview. Nobody's ever really asked, so it's kind of cool to be able to tell the story.
I love it.
There's still one story I haven't told, but I will tell one day. And if this podcast is still going on in about 20 or 30 years, then you got my word.
I'm not going to be here.
You got my word now that
I'll set a reminder. I'll set a reminder to follow up with you on that one.
2055.
Yeah, no, I got nothing to add. Thanks for this. It's really an honor for winning this, and look forward to seeing the final production.